the Helix farm, in terms of project nutrition, we're looking at nutrients both in the soil and in the growing crop throughout the season. So in terms of the soil, the key to understanding what's in the soil is measurement. If you can measure something, you can then start to manage it properly. So we were looking at standard soil analysis, we were looking at broad spectrum soil analysis, but we were also looking at the results from the TerraMap scanning that the Omnia team carried out. This helped us build a great picture of what was going on in the soil, how we could use that information to influence our recommendations for nutrition through the growing season. As the crop developed through the year, we also took tissue analysis from the crop, and that gave us again a clue as to what was being taken up by the plant as it was developing, and then how we could tailor nutrient recommendations further as the crop was developing and throughout the season. Again, we looked at some remote measurements, and we were looking at satellite data, we were looking at handheld sensors in the crop throughout the spring, and we also looked at Omnia plant vision as well. So we were looking at measurements of the crop as it was developing and the biomass levels that were accumulating through the season, and again influencing the crop nutrition recommendations that we were looking at on the farm here. The final piece of the jigsaw really is then at the end of the season knowing what the crop had actually taken up and how efficiently it had taken up the nutrients from the soil. And what we looked at was grain analysis, and we were looking at the grain again to give us a clear indication on what nutrients the crop had picked up and how the grain had developed and the levels of nutrition that were within the grain. So that was nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus, potassium, and a whole range of micronutrients as well. And that gives us then a historic picture of what's happened in the crop and how we might tailor our recommendations in the future for that particular field and that particular crop. The work's been done that shows the farmers or the growers with the highest nitrogen use efficiency tend to be the most efficient farmers and get the best value for money from their inputs. So what we're really looking at is how the crops use nitrogen over the growing season and making that process as efficient as possible. Now, we're doing a number of things here at the Helix farm. We've got a nitrogen response project going on, looking at finding the most optimum rate of nitrogen for winter wheat in particular. We're also looking at nitrogen through the season, and that will start this spring with an NMIN sample. Now, an NMIN sample is looking at the nitrogen content of the soil. We're measuring nitrogen across the field, walking in a zigzag across the field, taking samples as we go. That's then sent off to the lab, and we get a very detailed reading of how much nitrogen is contained within the soil. We then look at nitrogen in the crop through the growing season, and we can then see how the nitrogen that's in the soil is being taken up by the crop and how efficient that process has been. We monitor the crop remotely, looking at biomass through the season, and that might be from satellite, it might be from handheld sensors. We're actually looking at the nitrogen in the crop and then how we can tailor our nitrogen recommendations to get the best use of the farmer's nitrogen and getting that into the crop. This is also a milling wheat crop, so again we've got to maximise the protein level that's in the crop, and when it comes to harvest we can have a look at the grain, how much nitrogen is in the grain, how much protein that has been laid down by the plant, and we can then see how efficient our nitrogen has been taken up by the plant through the growing season. That gives us then a whole picture of what our nitrogen use efficiency is. Now, crops generally across the UK have a nitrogen use efficiency of about 55 to 70%. Obviously, if we can lift that level even higher, we're getting the best value for our nitrogen and the crop is utilising it in the most efficient way possible. In terms of micronutrients, we've found again typically that some of the key nutrients that change would be zinc and boron. We've also found, interestingly though, macronutrients are not always supplied in adequate quantities. So for example, magnesium would be an important macronutrient that needs careful management. In a number of tissue analysis tests that we've carried out, the levels have been quite low, so we've had to top up the actual requirements that the crop needs through the growing season. Sulfur would be another important nutrient that needs to be carefully managed and is a requirement particularly on the milling wheats and the oilseed rape that we've got here at the farm. and the monitoring results have shown that in some cases extra sulphur is required. So the results of the monitoring has really helped us to fine-tune some of the nitrogen recommendations, some of the nutrient recommendations that we're making here on the farm.